Dobrodošli. Please come into Australian residence. Hello, I'm Helena Studdert and I'm the Australian ambassador for Serbia. Well, I was born in Kalgoorlie in Western Australia. I love that name because Kalgoorlie is an Aboriginal name and it basically means wild melon, which is found in the desert. It was very desert country so it was very dry. Very hot, but it was also a very historical town. It was a very strong gold mining town, and so it's built its history on gold mining. It was a very country town, a long way from the capital city of Western Australia, Perth, so it was quite a different sort of environment to wake up in. We were quite isolated. We used to be able to just drive maybe 5-6 hours and we could hit the coast in a beautiful place called Esperance, but also that was a very, very small town, so it was quite an isolated area in Australia. It was a very common area for post-World War II migrants to settle, both from this area, former Yugoslavia, certainly from Eastern Europe. My father was Polish. He was a displaced person in the war. He was taken to Germany. He didn't return to Poland after the war. He was only just in his early 20s, and he migrated to Australia. And so he married my mother there. She was Australian. She was a Kalgoorlie girl. So he worked on the gold mines, and that's why he settled there and had a family, because a lot of migrants were working either building all the infrastructure around Australia or working on those sort of industries and building the mining industry. So my father worked there. We were a Catholic family because he was a Polish Catholic, and I had 2 brothers. I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters, so we were six children. We had a really good childhood. I was a really athletic type person, so we used to do a lot of sport. Those country towns in Australia were very much built around sport. A lot of clubs and things for young children. That was the sort of entertainment we had. Very happy family. My father was very hard working. My mother brought up 6 children. Very working class family, as we'd say in Australia. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot of love and fun and a lot of warmth, within the family group. So that's my basic background. That's where I come from. So I'm very strongly associated with family, which I find has a real resonance here in Serbia, actually, because people are very family focused. So it's my background as well. Well, it was as I said earlier, it was a very great, interesting type of childhood with lots of outdoor. We used to have these holidays in Esperance, so it's a place that people wouldn't really know because, as I said, it's quite isolated, but it was very white sand, beautiful, beautiful beaches, cold sea though. One of my favourite memories is just driving from the very heat to the middle of the desert in summer and seeing that beautiful sea and going straight down to the beach and into the water. So there's that. And the other thing I have from childhood memories is really the smell of fresh cut grass on a very hot summer's day, because, as I said, I used to do a lot of athletics, and I really remember those wonderful days of just running on that fresh cut grass. And I was a very good athlete, so I used to win. So of course we always have great memories of achievements like that. Kalgoorlie Australia was quite a sizable town, and it still is. I mean, about 30,000 people. So, you know, there were a number of schools, and of course we had play friends both in our street. We used to play in the street all the time. You know, I don't know how we survived with no shoes running on that hot ground, but we used to all the time play with neighbour kids. And also with school friends. My parents also had some very good friends, you know, that were part of either people my mother grew up with or part of the migrant family groups that had come to Australia around about the same time as my father. So we used to go and visit them, and so fond memories of having Christmas with lots and lots of kids playing and adults sitting around talking in all different languages. It's quite a strong memory for me. It was lovely, really. When I was a little girl, I hoped to become an Olympic athlete because I was a runner. But honestly, I also dreamt about being a teacher or a nurse because my aunties were nurses, and I liked athletics. So I thought about being a PT teacher, a physical training teacher. That was my dream when I was young. The dream ended, well, it didn't really, because when I went from high school, I did go to university to start doing physical education teaching. But unfortunately, I was a bit young. I came from a country town into the city, and I stopped studying. So I ended up just dropping out, and I went travelling instead. I think that was probably good for me because I wasn't particularly mature at the time. When I came back to decide to go back to doing anything, it was a bit late to go back to that, so I chose other career streams, really. I grew up in a very gender-based society where the men had one and the women stayed at home, and I was always very strong-willed. I always felt like I wanted to do something more. I knew I was very intelligent. You know, as a child, I was more intelligent than my elder brother, for example, because he hated school. Well, whether it's more intelligent or more diligent or more academic, but he hated school. So I always felt like, you know, there was something that I should be able to do, but why would I stay at home? So yes, I rebelled. That was one of the reasons why I dropped out of university when I went to Perth first to do teaching, because I just got very so much freedom after coming out of you know, quite a strict Catholic family, a lot of freedom, and I just decided to live a bit, and so I did rebel quite a lot. My father thought that I was lost, I was gone away, I was never going to come back to the family, but that all changed, of course, and he was very pleased when I joined the military because he felt that was going to make a woman out of me. Well, after travelling around for a little while, I decided that I really needed to focus on some sort of career and do something for myself. But I didn't really know what to do. I didn't really want to go back to teaching or picking up that training. So I decided instead to try in the army. So I joined the army. One of the reasons for joining the army was because I really felt, coming from somewhere like Kalgoorlie, where it was very male-dominated, focused, it was very hard for young girls to really achieve anything that was a bit different. Even though I wanted to be a teacher, and a lot of girls at my time were starting to follow some careers, it was very hard to do. And our mothers and our grandmothers had all been women that stayed in the home. So for me, I was a bit more ambitious, and I was looking for something that was going to be a bit different. My father had always talked about the army, and really it was just because I met a couple of people that were joining, so I thought, well, I'll try too. So I joined the military and did officer training, and that really started me on a long-term career. was in the army for 9 years, basically training, and then I after 8 years or so, well, after 5 years I got married, and then after 8 years I had my son, and around that time it was still in those days very difficult for a woman to be able to manage a career and a child, because there was no childcare, there was no job sharing, there was no part-time, particularly not when you were in the military. So after a while it just became too difficult, and I decided that I didn't want to compromise one or the other, so I decided to leave the military and go back to my academic study. I did go back to academic study because I decided that was a good thing to do. I could also combine it with bringing up children. So while I was bringing up my son, and then we had a daughter, I was at university for 10 years. I did my PhD and research, all of mostly which was in Australian history and gender studies, so it had to do with how women can, femininity and moving forward. And then after that I decided that I would like to do something that was going to be similar to the military, in that I could have a career where I could advance and keep being challenged. So I applied for and joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and worked there for 15 years, and then I was appointed here as my first ambassadorial position into Serbia. I think my biggest success really was completing the officer training in the military, because it was such a shock to go from a life of freedom, and I was free. I partied a lot. I was travelling. I was enjoying my life. To go to the military where you were formed, but there was also very strong discipline. It was very difficult to be living with 20 other young women who you didn't know from all over Australia. You were a long way from home. And I think that was probably the first real achievement where I felt I had come through and in some ways matured, and that grounding was very good, but it was hard, and a number of people left, and a couple of my best friend left, for example, and so I found that challenge difficult. So the day that you graduated and you were given your officer insignia, that was really very, very rewarding day for me. And the other time was really, I think, being appointed an ambassador, because these are things in your life that you don't imagine you will ever achieve. I think every ambassador will define it their own way. In my system they will, because we get some clear ideas about what we should do, but they're very high level things. They're improve trade and investment, keep the good people to people links going. I mean, these are just, these are very broad parameters. But when you're here on the ground, you have to think about what is it you're trying to do. And as far as I decided for myself, it was that I was in this country the highest representative of Australia, that through me people would have a sense about what Australia was, and so it was my job to be open, to be out there, to be trying to talk to people, to be trying to continue to build on the good, people-to-people links we have with Serbia and the other countries I'm accredited to. But it was more about using your personality, I felt. I mean, I hope that my government feels that's okay, but it was really about using your personality and doing the best you could to promote what you thought of Australia and what you wanted people in Serbia to see in and about Australia. Friendly, easygoing, open, caring, but we are a very modern, sophisticated society as well. So I hope that there was a way that you could try and combine all that and portray that to people here so that they continue to have that interest that a lot of people have in learning about Australia. Thinking about what I wanted to be as an ambassador to portray, it was certainly very much about being out there, being seen. But my personality is actually quite shy. I hate photographs, or I did. I've got used to them, but I dislike photographs. I've never really had a lot of media exposure. I'm quite a private person as well, so I like to have my space where it's just me and my family, and then, you know, have some public space. So for the first few months, it was challenging, but it was exciting because you had to push yourself beyond your normal sense of maybe turning away from photographs and things like that. So there was a bit of a clash, I think, there. I'm also quite a forthright person. I like things to be laid out on the table. With diplomacy, you can't always do that. But on the other hand, in learning ways to convey messages without, you know, being too frank and honest has also been something that I've really quite appreciated learning. So I am a bit shy, or I was a bit shy. I think after 3.5 years here, I'm no longer anywhere near as shy as I was. I'm very pleased actually with the way that the job in some ways has brought me out of myself and shown me that I can do this public persona, which, you know, most people are uncomfortable with until they have some sort of experience, and you don't often get that opportunity. So I've really thoroughly enjoyed that in a way. I think you'll always have that private bit, and every now and again I think it'll be nice to go home to Australia where no one really knows me or cares, for a while anyway. I think when I was growing up, there was a, you know, very strong value system in Australia generally, but also within my family. And I thoroughly believe that you're formed as a child. And for me, the values were very what we would call Anglo-Saxon, or, you know, in that it was family focused. So family was very important, and then you know, just honesty and integrity, and you know, moral respect for others. I mean, just all of those general good human being traits is something that continues to form my value system, which I tried very hard to instill in my children. We're not a religious family, but those common ethical values that people have about just being a human being and treating other human beings as you would want yourself to be treated is probably the core value that I think is important. And that extends beyond. I mean, whether it's you know, whether it's within your work life, whether it's within whether it's in diplomacy. I think that you have to have respect for others. You have to have respect for others. You have to have respect for others' position. And that's the only way that you can really operate. So the value that I put most of my life on is my family, and having that family support around you all the time. And then the other thing is to try and live your life as if you know, as if everybody's sort of like family, so that you're you know, you treat people with respect. That's broadly how I've just tried to live my life. It might sound a bit altruistic or a bit sort of, you know, sort of high level, but that's the basis. I just don't think we can operate as human beings without that. And I think women are particularly good at this because you are mothers often. Most women are mothers, and you know, you do tend to, once you have children. Once I had children, that, you know, that those feelings from childhood became much more strong in me when I realised that now I was forming another human being, and I think that's a very important thing. I think I was quite happy to sacrifice a lot of time and effort for my own ambitions, my own sense of moving forward, but there was always a line. And as I said, family was so important to me that, you know, if I had to ultimately choose, if for example I was over here enjoying my work and my daughter got sick, then my family would be, you know, definitely the answer. So I'm probably happy to be reasonably flexible about a lot of things, and I'd probably, you know, well, just I make judgments, I suppose, as they come up. But I think if there was something that I would sacrifice, something that I really wanted for, would be for my children, really. And you know, I have in fact at times thought about not taking an overseas posting, or in fact my husband and I have been separated for, you know, over 12 months to allow him to take my daughter back to Australia when she wasn't coping with the posting. So I think, you know, you make those, like any parent, you make those choices, and I think that's probably reasonably common among people all around the world, that, you know, children are who they would sacrifice the most for, I think. Where I was a bit of a rebel, I probably at times put myself at risk, whether it was you know, partying with friends too hard or something like that. I would prefer to forget that some of those experiences. However, on the other hand, they did in some ways form me, because I needed to explore myself before I could move on, and in the end I chose a very conservative career, considering I went into the military, although it's perhaps not that conservative for a woman, but it's a very structured organisation. So I suppose, thinking about personality, I might be shy, but I'm also quite structured, so I suited that, and it was something I perhaps needed. So I wouldn't like to repeat, and I have never repeated perhaps some of those experiences, because I don't think that that they're particularly good for you. But they formed me and they taught me, and thankfully to say, my children didn't inherit that gene. So. Well, after I joined the army, I got married. I was 24, going on 25. My husband was 25, 26. So we were married in 1982. So we've been married for 35 years now. Very happily married. No problems. Occasional 12-month separation for work, but sometimes that's quite good to stimulate your relationship and keep it going. Yeah, we've got two lovely children, young people now. Our son's 28, and he's a lawyer working in Australia, and a lawyer plus other things, but I won't explain all of that amount of study he's done. And our daughter's still at university. She's hoping to be a vet, and she's studying at university at the moment in Adelaide in Australia. I think you learn over time about, by watching other colleagues about, tradecraft for diplomacy is quite hard to pick up because it's quite a lot of it is subjective. It's stuff that you have to develop, but you can't do it in a classroom or you can't do it in a lecture hall. So, and it is very much about words, about being able to often deliver messages, perhaps that are hard messages, but in a soft enough way not to give offence. So I do think that there is an ability or a talent or a skill to using those words. I'm never sure how people develop that, and I'm never sure how good you are at it, because it just depends. You can watch other people and say, well, I wish I'd thought to say it that way, you know. So you're always learning. It's about a bit of care, I think. You get very good at thinking on your feet, thinking quickly, and as far as things go for me, I also think there's a bit of a judgment when you're a little bit perhaps more forthright than you might be. I had a senior officer once that I went into a negotiation with, and I'll be honest, I didn't like this person at all. Our personalities didn't gel at all, but I was amazed at how, you know, in the workplace I didn't really like his personality, but watching him in a diplomatic meeting, he was absolutely excellent. And I thought if he was like that all the time, then it might be easy to get on with him. But I learned from that, because I learned that, you know, he was someone that had a personality. I'll admit that I'm not always honest if you have to give a hard message. You know, I'm not always comfortable if you have to give some sort of hard message that you personally maybe don't feel is necessarily has to be that hard or whatever. You know, so your personality comes in there a little bit. On the other hand, I've also been on the situation where I've had someone try and give me a hard message, and I think that's unfair, but you can't react like you would personally either. You have to, you know, with some sense of yourself and your position and your own dignity and the dignity of being an ambassador, you have to sort of take that criticism and find a way to just say that, you know, I accept that this is what's happened and this is how you're feeling, and I will look at it and, you know, report back to my capital or whatever. So you might have that. But I find, you know, these days I'm very careful with electronic media, for example. I'm not sure, this is a personal opinion, but I'm not sure that I like the Twitters, because I think words can be misused and misconstrued all the time. I think one has to be very careful in sending email. I think you can't just respond quickly sometimes. You have to think about what's being asked and how you're phrasing your words. And I do think that there is a trend a little bit for people to take snap bites. Sometimes it's because people are responding to quick media questions or something, but there are often just bits of information that's out there, and sometimes people maybe respond quickly. They may not mean it, but often there is also this problem where I think you know, people aren't always held to account. So in my position, I think it's very important that you don't just speak quickly, that you think about things and you consider what you're saying. And I do that both orally but also written, because I think that in both ways there can be difficulties, and you have to be very careful about how you're using the word. I think, yes, you know, because of media, because of everything, our politicians, our leaders, our prime ministers, you know, royal families, they're all so much more accessible. And I think that in itself is something that does break down perhaps that little sense of, you know, mystique, or, you know, wonder what things are like behind, because people are much more open. I'm doing this interview, people are much more open because they're interested. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that people should have access. I think that the separation and the way to sort of, it is important that you have some symbolism of say, being an ambassador. Red carpets and all that, yes, they're very nice, but you know, you're never not working, and that in itself, you know, you think to yourself, oh, you know, when you're young, you know, it'd be lovely to walk along a red carpet, and you know, but actually, when you're doing that, you're worrying about, you might be thinking about something, or you have to go, or you might be giving a speech, and you're always thinking, you're always working. I don't know how to, if you need to restore too much. I sometimes feel that too much breakdown means that, as I was saying earlier, that politicians or you know, leaders or that might be tricked into saying things, or might say things without thinking, or might respond to populist you know, sentiments. But I feel that that's just. I think it's just part of modern life, and I think we just have to, you know, sort of try and live with it. We in Australia, we believe in everybody having a fair go. So for me, in some ways, having, you know, prime ministers and leaders and ambassadors and that all, you know, we're just all humans. We're all part of the human race. You know, when you're younger and you think, oh, I wonder what it would be like that to you know, to be up there, then you're just a human being like everybody else. You worry about the decisions you make, you worry about how you look, you worry about what you're saying, you know, so I think that there is, you know, I think symbolism's good, but I also think that access and normal human relations are also very important. In our system, you apply for, well, you don't apply, but you say, you know, I'm ready, I think I'm ready, I'd like to be an ambassador. It's good for my career, that's my next step. And you can put some preferences. And I'll be honest, I had done all my work in my diplomatic career. All of the work I've done has been in the Asia-Pacific region. So when I put my name down for some posts that I might be interested in, they were all in the Southeast Asia region. And then I got a phone call to say that my minister had decided to send me to Serbia. And that was a shock, I have to say. It wasn't something I expected. It wasn't something that I really, I had no idea. You know, I just hadn't worked in this part of the world. I hadn't been an expert on anything. My images of Serbia were linked with former Yugoslavia and the 1990s conflict. So I will admit I was a bit worried, and why am I going there? On the other hand, I knew that we had a lot of Serbian and Yugoslav background, and in fact I had a couple of good Serbian friends, so you know, I just thought about them and thought they were great people, so it should be fine. Well, when I got here, I was pleasantly surprised, I mean, I must say. All of my early meetings, everything was just, Australia was so warmly welcomed, and I just felt so at home so quickly. It helped, I suppose, that my father was Polish, and I'd been to Poland and Ukraine, but that was just on a holiday. Living here has been a real experience. It's been really incredibly interesting to just learn about a different culture. My husband and I we took language lessons so that we could at least order meals and do our shopping and things like that. I would have liked to have had more time to learn more, but really everybody's been really welcoming and warm, and I've met a lot of Serbian people, not just in government, but you know, sort of right throughout. I had a great experience early on where I went off on an adventure with Wild Serbia, just a local club near Valjevo, and have never worked so hard in my life. If previously I was talking about a challenge, that was a challenge that, you know, at my age, in my 50s, doing something like that with my daughter, going down 5 waterfalls, rappelling in the middle of the outskirts of like remote areas of Serbia was absolutely amazing. So my experiences have gone from not only having good access to leaders in Serbia and my other countries of accreditation, but certainly because I live in Serbia, being able to just experience life here for 3 years and just become so familiar with it, and that's been just a wonderful experience. In fact, I feel that the 3.5 years for me have been another huge growing. I mean, it was a very big learning curve to learn. You know, it's a very complex society, very, you know, historical, very rich, very so many elements to it and so many layers. And even now, I think I'm understanding something, and I think there's one or two layers that I still haven't got to. It just, you know, it goes on like that. But I think both my husband and I have felt very, very comfortable and really enjoyed it. And as I said, I feel with the job and just with living in another country for this amount of time, and that you know, you grow again. And I think that if you can continue growing at all stages of your life, then you know, this is the most healthy thing to do, and it's what makes life so much fun. I think going back to Australia, it'll be interesting, because I think what I've learned here in Serbia, and which is very similar, is family. Although, you know, Serbia probably more strongly than Australia. I mean, I have very strong family values, but what I really like seeing here is that, you know, you still see families with grandparents living with children and then with grandchildren running around. And I had the wonderful experience when I was doing that canyoning with Wild Serbia to visit a raspberry farmer and his family, and they gave us a meal, and they couldn't speak any English and I couldn't speak any Serbian at all at that time. I had my daughter with me, she was only 21 at the time, and you know, we had this great introduction to a rural family where it was, you know, there was a couple of, you know, generations, 3 or 4 generations, and then all the neighbours came over. That environment is the environment of my childhood, but not necessarily Australia these days. You know, Australians have become very city focused and very up and, you know, going forward. We're a very prosperous, modern, fast moving society now. So some of the similarities are also becoming to be some of the differences. I think also that, you know, we both countries have, both peoples, I should say, rather than speaking at country level, both peoples have a sense of pride in their history. I think the only difference is that I think Australians at this stage are more forward-looking, and they encompass everything. We're probably the best at taking bits from everybody that comes to our country, and we just mould it all together. And I'm personally very proud of Australian multiculturalism. I think there's a good mix of cultures here, but I think people haven't yet learnt to really take advantage of that rich mix, and then sort of, you know, take that forward. But family focus, generally societal values are very similar. Serbia is probably a little bit more conservative than Australia now. I think there's still quite a conservative focus, and that comes with the strength of family. But there's similarities and there's differences, but, you know, there's no doubt that we're Southern Hemisphere and you're Northern Hemisphere. Our weather's much better, except for your summers. Well, I've always thought that, you know, I'm also accredited to Macedonia and to Montenegro, and the interesting thing for me is that, you know, this region is moving. I think it is moving forward. Croatia's now joined the EU, and in the 3 years I've been here, there's been both Serbia and Montenegro have become candidate members, and then they're moving towards opening EU negotiations. Look, Australia's position is EU integration. You know, is strongly supported by Australia. Dialogue between parties where there's any disagreements or disputes, we encourage productive dialogue. For me, I've seen that change in the 3 years I've been here. I've seen political change. I've seen, you know, now moving towards the EU, and my hope is that this will continue, and that if I came back to Serbia in 5 or 6 years' time, I would be, you know, really amazed in the progress that's been made, but at the same time I hesitate because I was thinking I'm not sure that Serbia will change that much itself. The people will be the same. What we'll see hopefully is more prosperous, more economic development and more sort of benefits flowing to the people, so that there is some hardship still in Serbia, and the economic circumstances and the living conditions are still, I know, difficult for some people. Australia went through economic reforms in the 1980s, and I have to say this is one of the reasons why our economy has been able to sustain itself through these last 5 or 6 turbulent years. So I'm hoping that Serbia can go through those reforms for itself, not just for the EU, and that this will see that if I come back in 5 years' time, that things will be, markedly different, and for the people, I mean, and improving going forward. Thank you for coming. Do widzenia. Priятno.